Dear ones, it has been another week of pandemic and politics and everything unfolding. And we have another month until our elections. And it seems like the pace of news is not going to slow. One thing I know about People's People is that in general, you all pay close attention to the goings on in your small circles, in our wider community, and in our wider world. And at this moment, I give you permission to pay less attention. Not no attention, but less. The goings on of the 24-hour news cycle and social media and all of the ways we get our news now are designed to hijack our nervous systems, to keep us agitated and outraged and anxious. And you don't need to do that all the time. So I invite you over the next month to engage the news and the big goings on about which we have very little control with intention. That might look like taking one day a week as a news Sabbath, trusting you'll catch the big stories the next day. That might look like on the evening of the next debate, whatever that might look like, choosing to spend the time with a good book or a good friend, or going to bed early and catching the highlights the next day. This might look like when you find yourself doom scrolling social media, a word that I've learned in the last month, to set down the device, or at least start texting a friend, or write a real letter, or give some money and attention to something that helps weave our community together and build beloved community. This is not a sprint to the finish line of election day. We have a marathon ahead of us. The long haul work of healing ourselves, our community, and our world, of doing the work of transformation into a beloved community. And I want you to have the energy and the resources to be able to do that. So friends, please take care of yourselves the way you need to in this moment. The headlines will wait for you. We know that much. So come, let us gather. Come, let us seek solace and refuge with each other, so we might have the energy and the conviction to do the work that this moment is calling us to do. Come, let us gather. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning. I'm Tim Bardick, and I'm here, or virtually here, as a member of the Sunday Services Committee. Also helping out this morning from the Sunday Services Committee is Nolan Hughes. I'd like to welcome all of you to People's Church. A special welcome to anyone visiting this Zoom service. And we hope it helps support you in living a life open to love, open to hope, and open to change. People's Church is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association. We're part of a long tradition of liberal religion. Among other things, liberal religion means that we believe we need to try to see things as they truly are. Because we owe justice to our fellow human beings, we must try to also see the world through our fellow human beings' eyes. This requires imagination, but cannot be done simply through imagination, but rather must start with listening to others' stories. Only if we fit all of our stories and all of the evidence together can we begin to figure out how to best transform this broken world and help it live up to its promise of justice for all.
Good morning, happy October. This is our first song together, Meditation on Breathing. I invite you to find a good sitting or standing position for breathing, and here we go.
Good morning. Good morning. As we start our chalice lighting, you're encouraged to type in the chat if you're lighting a chalice at home, that a chalice is lit wherever you might be. Good morning. Today's chalice lighting is Until All Means All by Erica Hewitt. The chalice, as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, arose as a beacon of hope in an atmosphere of tyranny. The chalice arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized would neither be forgotten nor ignored, because they are beloved and precious from the perspective of the holy. This morning, we remember all of the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly, through police violence or government policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they are anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we each light a chalice in our homes, may we make our lives a beacon, a symbol of a promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all.
I want to tell you a tale from India. There was a time when the monks in a monastery were arguing all the time, and they went to the Buddha and said, "We cannot stop arguing." And the Buddha said, "Well, you should know that of all beings, that your problems cannot be solved by arguing. Please be peaceful and be a light of kindness into the world." "Let me tell you a tale," he said, "of several kingdoms who learned this lesson. There were two kingdoms that were side by side, and one was a vast kingdom with great armies and wealth and lands, and then the kingdom right next to them was much smaller, very small armies, smaller lands, much less wealth. And of course, as you can imagine, the king from the larger kingdom decided that they wanted to overtake the smaller kingdom and take it into themselves, into their own kingdom. When the king of the small kingdom found this out, he did not want his armies to be slaughtered and have bloodshed. And so what he said was, "Go and surrender yourselves, and I shall escape." So the king and the queen snuck out into the far reaches of the town, dressed as potters when the armies came. And they lived like that for many, many years until one day they had a baby, a strapping, healthy baby boy, and they loved him so much and wanted him to be safe. And after a couple years, they were so disappointed that they were so afraid that their baby would get hurt or that someone would find out who they were and tell the king and that they would be killed. So they sent their son out to the countryside to be raised. And wouldn't you know, it was a dozen years later, but the king was recognized in the marketplace by who used to be his barber, who's now the new king's barber. So he told the new king, knowing he would be rewarded richly, exactly where the old king lived. And the new king was very worried that they would try to come back and move them out, try to take their kingdom back. So he ordered his soldiers to go and capture and kill the old king and queen. On the same day, their son, who hadn't seen them in months and had missed them so much, decided that he wanted to come visit his parents. So he is walking into the kingdom right as he is entering the kingdom walls. The soldiers have tied up his parents and are leading them out of the kingdom walls to their death. He pushed his way to the front of the mob, and him and his father caught their eyes at the same time, and his father said to him, hatred is never ended by more hatred. Only by love can hatred cease. He said that 3 times, and the soldiers thought the guy was going mad. But at the very end, on the 3rd time, he said, those who are wise will understand my meaning. And right then, the soldiers killed the parents, the king and the queen. So the young prince ran out into the forest and cried and grieved. All night he lay there and he plotted his revenge. And the next morning he put his plan into action, and he went into the palace and he asked to be an apprentice to the king's elephant trainer. And he was accepted, and every morning in the palace he would get up and sing the most beautiful music and play his lute. And just like he planned, the king heard him out on his balcony and said, who is playing this beautiful music in the palace? And they said, it's the new elephant trainer's apprentice. He said, bring him to me. And he played such beautiful music that the king says, now you shall be my manservant and you shall work for me. And after several years, he was promoted to the king's greatest confidant and counselor. And this was just like he planned. One day the king said, I want to go hunting, just you and I. And they went out into the forest, and after a long day of hunting, they laid down in the afternoon by a cool stream, and the king fell asleep. And the boy said, this is it. This is my chance to exact my revenge. And he took his sword out of his sheath, wanting to kill the king, but all he could remember was his father's final words. Only by love is hatred ceased, not by more hatred. And he knew he couldn't go against his father's final words, and he sheathed his sword. But then he said, I have been plotting this for years. He killed my parents and he stole my kingdom, and he took his sword out again. And right then the king woke up and he said, ah! And they said, what is it, my lord? He said, I just had a dream that my life was about to be ended by the son of the king and the queen that had this kingdom before. I woke up fearing for my life. And the boy put his hand on the king's throat, and he said, that is true. It is I am the prince. And you killed my parents, and I would like to exact revenge. And the king rolled over on his knees and said, please, please don't kill me. I'm so sorry for what I've done. And the prince knew that this is exactly what his father wanted, not to be continued to kill, but to have love and forgiveness. So the king and the prince agreed that they each would keep each other safe And as they went back to the kingdom, the king told all of the palace people about what had happened, and that the prince was now going to be living free. And he had the prince tell all the people in the palace about his father's final words and what they meant to him. And what the young man said was, when my father said, hatred only ceases by hatred, never ceases with more hatred, only by love, I knew that he did not want me to harbor this anger in my heart, and that I needed to let it go. And it took me a long time before I could do that. And now I feel a lightness, because if I didn't, and I killed the king for killing my parents, and then some of my people would kill their people, and the killing would continue, and the hatred would continue, and so much pain would be had, and suffering. But it is by love and forgiveness that we shall begin a new path of peace. And so it was that the king returned the wealth and the armies and the land to the young prince. The young prince married the king's daughter, and eventually the two kingdoms lived once again side by side, but this time in peace. And this is when the Buddha said to the monks, now you see a story of forgiveness and reconciliation, and this is the path. For never in this world do hatreds cease through hatred. Through love alone do they end. This is the eternal law.
Griffin's presence in that video reminds me of a few small announcements I'd like to make as we continue on. Next Sunday is our animal blessing service. So I invite you to participate in a number of ways. The first is, if you have a beloved animal in your house, alive, or maybe a stuffed animal or a figurine or something, please bring them with you to the service so we can see them on your screen. Also, if you have a picture of a beloved animal that you would like included in a slideshow that we're making, please send that to Sarah Hill. You can see her email address in the weekly newsletter, or the monthly newsletter. And then if you need an excuse to add a bit of joy or silliness to your life this week, we are in the process of putting together a compilation video of People's People singing and dancing and otherwise enacting the song Baby Shark. So if you need that in your life, please send us a clip or a drawing of a shark, or you reenacting Baby Shark with toys in your bathtub, or however you want to engage with that song. And so we will have that moment of joy and celebration with one another next week. People's people are generous people, and your generosity even transcends death. So in this year, unlike any time we have lived through, many of you understandably have questions about the church's finances. And the board will be reviewing some things this week and be working on a way to communicate our status with all of you who have questions. But the short answer is that we are okay. Our income will be down. We won't have a bazaar. We won't have many building rentals, if any, this year. We are expecting pledges to go down, although some of you with the means have been giving more than you pledged to make up for the people who've had to reduce their pledges. And our expenses, we are able to hold about the same. So we will be running a deficit this year. We will be drawing on our reserve fund and on our unrestricted fund to make up that deficit. And we have this reserve fund and this unrestricted fund in part because for the past few years, we've run slight budget surpluses annually, but a lot of that money comes from bequests. So when people's people die, they often include a small portion of the money that outlives them as a gift to the church. And those small portions add up and are the thing that are carrying us through this time, the thing that have enabled us not to cut staff and programs and offerings now, because we have generous ancestors who are carrying us through. I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful there are some family members of these generous people in attendance today, so I just want to lift up that gratitude. And I also want to invite all of you to become plan to become a generous ancestor in the same way. I encourage you to think about including the church in your end-of-life financial planning. If you expect your money to outlive you, or even if you don't. So I have designated the church as a beneficiary of a portion of my retirement savings. So if I die and that money is still there, a small portion will come to the church. And that allows me to both feel grateful to our previous generous ancestors and know that I am part of that tradition. And that is powerful. So this is the moment where I continue to encourage you to be the generous people that you are, to give to support the work of People's Church. Thank you for all that you do and all of the people who have come before have done to keep us steady and continuing forward in this unsteady time.
Good morning, everyone. It's hard to believe in the sun in the dark of the night, and it's hard to believe in the stars and bright morning nights. Well, we all need a place we can go to learn what it is real, to ponder the depths of the soul where
if you could join me in reading the words of giving thanks. From the countless gifts we each have been given, gifts of life and love and sustenance, we bring these small portions to share in the works of love which none of us can accomplish alone.
People's Church is a community that supports one another in good times and hard times. I want to share with you all this morning a meditative practice that I have been doing for most of my life. Before I knew what a meditative practice was, this was something that my parents would do with me when I woke in the night as a child and could not get back to sleep. They called it the relaxing game, and it's a body scan meditation. And it's something that I'm finding myself doing when I wake in the night with anxiety or overwhelm and struggle to sleep again. So I invite you into a comfortable posture. I hope you can be well supported by whatever you're sitting on or laying on or whatever. And first, notice your feet. Thank them for all that they do. And work to relax every muscle in your foot. Release all of the tension that you are holding there this morning. Next, we move to our legs. Thank them for all they do. And notice any tension that you're holding in your legs, any discomfort. And relax and shift to release the tension and let the discomfort go. Next, we move to our hips. Thank them for all they do. And notice any tension or discomfort in our hips. And relax the muscles, release the tension, move out of the discomfort. Next, our bellies. Thank your belly for all that it does. Notice if there's any tension or distress or discomfort. And relax those muscles. Shift into a more comfortable posture. Move out of the distress or discomfort. Next, we turn our attention to our hands. Notice any tightness or discomfort. Any tension. And shift or stretch or wiggle to release the tension, to move into a more comfortable posture and more comfortable position. Next, we notice our hands or our arms. Thank them for all they do. Notice any tension or strain or discomfort. And relax or shift to release or lessen the discomfort or stress. Next, we notice our shoulders. We thank them for all that they do. And we notice tightness or strain. We roll them back, perhaps, if we've been holding them high. And we release tension or discomfort. Next, we notice our necks. We thank them for all they do. And we notice if there is strain or discomfort or tension. And we relax our muscles or shift our posture to move into more comfort. And finally, we notice our faces. We thank them for all they do. And we notice if there are points of tension or strain, and we relax them. We loosen our jaws. And we do one final attention to our whole body, thanking it for all that it does, and noticing any points of tension or stress or strain, and shifting or relaxing or otherwise centering ourselves into a more comfortable way of being in our bodies.
spell to be said against hatred. Until each breath refuses they, those, them. Until the dramatis personae of the book's first page says, each one is you. Until hope bows to its hopelessness, only as oneself bows to another. Until cruelty bends to its work and sees suddenly, I. Until anger and insult know themselves burnable legs of a useless table. Until the unsurprised, unbidden knees find themselves bending. Until fear bows to its object as a bird's shadow bows to its bird. Until the ache of the solitude inside the hands, the ribs, the ankles. Until the sound the mouse makes inside the mouth of the cat. Until the inaudible acids bathing the coral. Until what feels no one's weighing is no longer weightless. Until what feels no one's earning is no longer taken. Until grief, pity, laughter, longing know themselves mirrors. Until by we mean I, them, you, the muskrat, the tiger, the hunger. Until by I, we mean as a dog barks, sounding and vanishing, and sounding and vanishing completely. Until by until, we mean I, we, you, them, the muskrat, the tiger, the hunger, the lonely barking of the dog before it is answered.
Reading is by Junata Petrus Nassau, who wrote the following poem in honor of the lives lost and hearts broken due to the police state. May we all be the courageous healers and wild dreamers and indefatigable warriors of sweetness and change that puts an end to this guilty system. Could we please give the police departments to the grandmothers? Give them the salaries and pensions and the city vehicles, but make them a fleet of vintage cars, Corvettes, and Jaguars, with white leather interior. Diamond in the back, sunroof top. Let the cars be badass. You would hear old school jams like Patti LaBelle, Stevie Wonder, Anita Baker, and Al Green. You would hear Sweet Honey and the Rock harmonizing on "We who believe in freedom will not rest," bumping on the speakers. And they got the booming system. If you up to mischief, they will pick you up swiftly in their sweet ride and look at you until you catch shame and look down in your lap. She asks you if you are hungry, and you say yes, because of course you are. She got a crown of dreadlocks, and on the dashboard you see brown faces like yours, shea buttered and loved up. And there are no precincts, only love temples that got spaces to meditate and eat delicious food. Mangoes, blueberries, nectarines, cornbread, peas and rice, fried plantain, fufu, yams, greens, okra, pecan pie, salad, and lemonade. Things that make your mouth water and soul arrive. All the hungry bellies know warmth. All the children expect love. The grandmas help you with yoga, help you with homework, practice yoga with you, and teach you how to make jambalaya and coconut cake from scratch. When you're sleepy, she will start humming and rub your back while you drift off. A song that she used to have the record of when she was your age. She remembers how it felt like to be you and be young and not know the world that good. Grandma is a sacred child herself who just circled the sun enough times into the ripeness of her cronehood. She wants your life to be sweeter. When you're wild and out because your heart is broke or you don't have what you need, grandmas take your hand and lead you to their gardens. You can lay down among the flowers, her grasses, roses, dahlias, irises, lilies, collards, kale, eggplants, blackberries. She wants you to know that you are safe and protected, universal, limitless, sacred, sensual, divine, and free. Grandma is the original warrior. Wild since birth, comfortable in loving fiercely. She has fought so you don't have to, not in the same ways at least. So give the police departments to the grandmas. They are fearless, classy, and actualized, blossomed from love. They wear what they want and say what they please. Believe that. There won't be noise citations when the grandmas ride through our streets, blasting Stevie Wonder, Nina Simone, Marvin Gaye, Alice Coltrane, Jimi Hendrix, KRS-One, all the good music. The kid's gonna hula hoop to it and sell her lemonade made from heirloom pink lemons and maple syrup. The car is solar powered and carbon footprintless. The grandmas designed the technology themselves. At night, they park the cars in a circle so all can sit in them with the sunroofs down and look at the stars, talk about astrological signs, what to plant tomorrow based on the moon's mood, and help you memorize Audre Lorde and James Baldwin quotes. She always looks you in the eye and acknowledges the light in you with no hesitation or fear. And Grandma loves you fiercely forever. She sees the pain in our bravado, the confusion in our anger, the depth behind our coldness. Grandma Grandma knows what oppression has done to our souls and is going to change it one love temple at a time. She has no fear.
I'm preaching about policing today. And I know many of us have strong emotions about this, especially now. Many of us care deeply for individual police officers. Many of us have had interactions with the police that left us scared and traumatized. Many of us over the past few years are coming to new awareness about how the police operate, especially in communities of color. All three might be true for you. I will also be speaking some about domestic violence in my sermon. And so I want to encourage you to take care of yourself, whatever that looks like for you in this moment. One of the benefits of Zoom Church is you can sign out or just walk away from the screen without drawing any attention to yourself. It's a lot harder to get up and leave in the middle of a service when we're all in the same room together. So if that's what you need to do right now, I invite you to do it. You don't need to give this your time and attention if you don't have the capacity, if this will hijack your nervous system for the day. You're welcome to come back in about 18 minutes for some singing and our social time. I want to tell you a story about bruises. There are all kinds of bruises. There are bruises from violence and bruises from accidents. And if you're like me, bruises that bloom on your skin for seemingly no reason at all. There are the necessary bruises, like the one I have on my arm where I got my flu shot. This week, my toddler's doctor counted the bruises on her legs during her well child visit to make sure there were enough. Because bruises, especially on the front of the legs, are evidence that my child is playing hard enough. A 2-year-old without any bruises makes doctors worry. And bruises are other kinds of evidence as well, evidence of crimes. There are bruise patterns caused by different kinds of assaults. There are bruises that show someone was an attacker or attacked. Bruises are important in criminal investigations, especially domestic violence cases. They can be evidence that someone who seemed like an aggressor in one moment had been enduring an ongoing pattern of violence. They can make the difference between a violent act being classified as assault or self-defense. Bruises can in part determine whether charges are pressed, whether someone is convicted of a crime, and how much jail time is sought. Bruises can change someone's life. So all of this is prelude to a story I'm going to tell you about our local law enforcement, about Kalamazoo Public Safety. This story is from Jessica Glynn, who is the Senior Director for Law and Policy at the YWCA of Kalamazoo, a lawyer for people who have survived domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking right here in our town. She's also my neighbor and my friend, and she's given me permission to share her name and this story with all of you. So in her work, Glynn is in regular contact with our local law enforcement agencies. And not too long ago, she had a conversation with Chief Carrie Ann Thomas about bruising in domestic assault cases. And Thomas was the chief of the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety until she retired a few days ago. She worked in KDPS for 27 years. And as they spoke, Chief Thomas shared her surprise that bruises look different on white skin than they do on black skin. Our most recent chief of police didn't know that bruises look different on black skin than they do on white skin. And bruises look different on different skin because of different levels of melanin, The color changes with bruises are often more subtle on darker skin than they are on paler skin. If a person doesn't know Black skin, it can take more attention to notice and document Black people's bruises. Older bruises are often harder to see on darker skin. While my pale skin will show the yellow end stage of a bruise for what seems like weeks, the melanin of darker skin makes it impossible to see that stage of healing. And our most recent public safety chief didn't know that. And knowing about racial differences in bruising allows public safety officers to better document domestic violence cases against people of color and keep people out of prison who acted violently in self-defense. Jessica Glynn has had many local Black and brown women as clients who responded with violence to persistent abuse and were convicted of crimes. Their lives might have unfolded differently had there been a better understanding of their bruises. Charges might have been downgraded or dropped altogether if there was stronger evidence that they were acting in self-defense. I tell this story not to condemn Chief Thomas as she retires. I'm not calling her a bad person, in part because that's against my religion. More on that later, and because this is a systemic issue. Teresa Clan has posted in our comments that teachers never taught her about how to look at bruises on people of color in nursing school. This is not just about our police, and they need to do better. I tell this story to show how deeply ingrained racism is in our systems of policing. I don't think our most recent chief set out to not learn about bruises, but it wasn't part of her training. Beyond the Black people killed by police whose names have become known, Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Tony McDade, and so very many others. There are so many other ways, smaller ways, that the systemic racism of our public safety system hurts Black and brown people. Not knowing that bruises look different on Black skin is a small piece of that larger pattern. And that someone can serve in our local Department of Public Safety for over 2 decades and never learn about how bruises look on Black skin, or perhaps learn it and then forget it and seem surprised to learn it again, it breaks my heart. For all of us. Mostly for the people who are not receiving equal treatment under law, but also for the officers who don't have the information they need to do good work. And for everyone in this community whose hopes for a beloved community are dashed every time a public safety official fails to notice bruises on Black or brown skin. This bruise anecdote is just one piece of a much larger problem, a problem that is hurting all of us. People mistreated by the police deserve most of our care and advocacy. And if we're having this conversation, we need to name how our system of policing hurts the police officers themselves. The trauma that our police officers endure is unfathomable. Being with people on the worst day of their lives, over and over again for every working day, is hard on the soul. I will tell you one more story. One of my cousins works for a statewide law enforcement agency in California. He's a white man from a rural, predominantly white community, and his first assignment after completing training was in Compton, a city that is primarily Black and Latinx. He didn't have the cultural competence to serve in that community well, and it was far away from his close family and friends. This was his first assignment. Compton was his first assignment because he had no seniority in the system. He put in his time there and was then able to transfer to a place closer to home where he was more comfortable and more capable of serving. I spent the length of his time there worrying and praying for him and the people of Compton, worrying and praying that everyone would be safe, worrying and praying that my cousin would not have to make a split-second decision that would haunt him or tear apart a community, worrying and praying that the people of Compton will be well served by the people sworn to protect them. And I was angry. I still am angry. Angry that this law enforcement agency prioritized seniority when making assignments rather than figuring out who would be the most effective in a certain place. Angry that this agency clearly hadn't done enough recruiting from Compton and similar communities to have officers who want to serve that community. Angry that people of Compton will likely be served by a series of new recruits putting in their time until they can work somewhere else. Not people who want to be there, not the most skilled people, or people who have put in the years needed to cultivate care and trust and relationships in a community that has been poorly served by law enforcement, which will just perpetuate this cycle of distrust and violence. No one is served by this. No one's inherent worth is respected by this. What truth does our Unitarian Universalist faith have to speak to us when we think about policing? We have our principles, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We believe that everyone is worthy of love and care and that no one is beyond redemption. We believe that the marginalized should be neither forgotten nor ignored because they are beloved and precious from the perspective of the holy. And what does that mean now in this moment? It means that first, we recognize and proclaim that another way to say inherent worth and dignity of every person is to say Black Lives Matter. Your board released a statement about this earlier this summer. We believe that every person is precious, and our faith calls us to follow the leadership of and work alongside the people whose worth and dignity is most under threat at this moment. And as we do this, we remember the instructions of poet Jane Hirschfield that we heard earlier. We refuse they and them and those. Because conversations about policing tend to break into factions. And it is our religious call to draw the circle wide enough that everyone is still inside it. Whether we believe our system of policing is broken, or whether we believe it is working exactly as it was designed to, it dehumanizes everyone it touches. A training on bruises and a redesigned seniority system is not enough. It needs transformation. And there is no they, those, them in the transformation we seek. No one left outside the love temples that might actually keep us safe. Those outposts of beloved community that we yearn for. We seek wholeness and integrity for everyone. We yearn for an all lives matter that includes all Black lives, and all lives matter like Nolan described in our chalice lighting. And our faith compels us to always draw the circle wide, then wider, then wider. Because in this moment, we need to transform our system of policing for my cousin who works in law enforcement, for the people in Compton, for the survivors in our community whose bruises aren't noticed, and for our local officers who fail to notice. All of them have less integrity and less wholeness because of this. All of them suffer from our current system. The suffering isn't equal, clearly, and I'm not going to say that it is. The suffering of someone who enacts oppression is not equivalent to the person who is oppressed. And everyone is dehumanized in that interaction. Everyone's inherent worth is ignored. And the work before us all is to envision a safety where everyone is actually safe, where everyone is held in care, where everyone is treated justly and fairly, and held accountable when they fall short, where no one is expendable, where no lives matter less. Perhaps that means giving the police departments to the grandmothers and transforming precincts into love temples. A world where the people tasked with keeping us safe can look you in the eye and acknowledge the light in you with no hesitation or fear. We are not in that world, but I believe it is possible. It is my deepest hope that a new beginning will emerge from the death and protest and tumult and upheaval of this moment. Of course, all of that is very abstract. And so let's get a little more concrete. What are the next best steps for Unitarian Universalists in this moment? This summer, the Unitarian Universalist Association released a statement called "Stop Calling the Police and Start Eradicating Anti-Blackness." A version of it appeared in the UU World magazine that all members of this church receive. If you haven't read it yet, please do. It has some rich ideas. And it calls us in our institutions and in our lives to rethink safety and our paths to achieving it. Given that the police are likely to treat people disparately based on race and identity, how do people used to relying on the police think more critically about their role in our lives? Knowing that every police call has the potential to continue patterns of dehumanization and perhaps end in tragedy, can we call the police less? How might those of us with privilege move into discomfort to keep others safe? That might mean not calling the police sometimes when we might otherwise. Perhaps when a neighbor's music is too loud, or there's minor vandalism, or other small moments when no one is hurt. It might mean talking to someone who seems like they're struggling rather than asking a public safety officer to do that. There are a lot of social workers, therapists, teachers, and others who know how to de-escalate a situation without explicit or implicit threats of violence on this Zoom call right now. And I invite you to think about how this moment and your faith is calling you to use those skills in a new way. Because the skills are there. Many of you have them. Some of you know that I've started a conversation about this in my neighborhood. And so we're not very far, but trying to think about, can we have a phone call that someone in our neighborhood who is comfortable stepping into something that's a little uncomfortable and deciding and being that first step before we invite the police into our neighborhood? And what does it look like to keep each other safe in different ways? It's hard. It's almost a rewiring of our brain to figure out how we do this stuff in a different way, what a different sort of safety looks like. But it's a vital thing to start imagining. Those are the individual choices, and transformation also comes through policy change. I'm not going to outline specific policy proposals because that is beyond my expertise, and I don't believe there is one faithful position on training programs or funding levels for public safety. I do want to make sure you know that draft 2021 budgets for cities and counties in our area will be released soon. Read these proposals. Listen to the communities most impacted and most failed by law enforcement. Follow their lead and amplify their voices. If you have opinions about how public safety or how public funds are spent on public safety and what it is that keeps us safe now. Watch for these drafts, talk to your neighbors, make your voice heard. Decisions about budgets are made by our elected leaders, so tell them what you think and make them hear you. So, dear ones, in this moment when so much is uncertain, let us imagine a new way forward. A way where no one has been told explicitly or implicitly through police violence or government policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they're anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. A way where all bodies are cared for, all bruises are seen, and no one is hurt. A way that refuses they, them, those. A way that acknowledges the light in each of us with no hesitation or fear. A way of love and hope and change. And let us use the energy that we have and the power and time that have been given to us to make it so. So may it be so. May we make it so. And amen.
There is more love. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere.
In closing today, I offer the Gamaliel Common Prayer. So this is a prayer drafted by leaders of Gamaliel, which is the national network of congregation-based community organizations or community organizing that Isaac, which we are part of, is part of. And they have offered a prayer that they are encouraging everyone to say for the days before the election. There are reflections and other clergy reflecting on it and sharing their thoughts on the Gamaliel website, which you might want to look at or just have this poem. Source of all being, Sacred mystery, you are the wellspring of justice. Weaver of the warp and weft of history, weave our lives into the fabric of your will. Guide us toward the beloved community. Forgive us for when we have failed to give shape to the beloved community in our communities and in our lives. All around us, the ugly onslaughts of white nationalism, hate crimes, and systemic racism devastate your people, divide us, and threaten our democracy. All around us, the wicked strut, and in high places are those who encourage the basest of attitudes and actions. Grant us wisdom and courage to confront these evils with the power of love and truth. Free us from timidity and equivocation. Help us to be bold in thought and action. May our lives and our faith communities model the change we hope to see in the world. As we approach the November elections, keep us mindful that the right to vote is a sacred trust won by beatings, by imprisonments, by blood, by the relentless struggles of many who came before us. Help us to honor that legacy. May we vote our conscience and encourage others to do the same. Heal our nation. Heal our hearts. Heal our nation. Amen. Go in peace and go in love.
And lastly, there is more joy. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. And I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
Thank you all for being here this morning. This is the moment that we pause to give those who are done for the day and want to continue on our blessings as they leave the meeting. And if you would like to stay, we'll break ourselves up into small groups for conversation for about 15 minutes.